Welcome to another episode of People Pod. Today, we're looking at this really profound contradiction.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, how does a Boston church choir girl, someone who moves to Germany to sing in the musical Hair,
Right.
how does she end up pioneering modern electronic dance music?
Huh.
And how does a simple typo on a record sleeve give her one of the most famous stage names in pop history?
It is an incredible story.
It really is. So we've got a huge stack of sources today, everything from musicology archives to historical interviews and even some very recent streaming data. And our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the true story of this ultimate musical chameleon.
Yes.
We are, of course, talking about Donna Summer.
Born Donna Adrienne Gaines, actually. And her story, well, it's the absolute definition of a nonlinear career.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just a profound contradiction, like you said, because she was far more than just some disco creation engineered by European producers. She was really an architect of the modern pop landscape and someone who constantly fought for her own creative agency.
Right. And for you listening, while you might know her as the voice behind these massive, soaring 70s anthems, her actual story involves intense label battles, navigating this massive cultural backlash against her entire genre, and deeply complex relationship with her fan base. Not to mention a legacy that literally just shattered streaming records at the 2026 Winter Olympics. So we're going to figure out how she survived all of it.
It's a lot to cover.
It is. But before we get into the timeline, I want to frame this for you. Think about how modern internet trends work today.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Like a sound or a specific aesthetic blows up on social media. It becomes totally inescapable.
Yeah, everywhere you look.
Exactly. It gets heavily commercialized by massive fast food brands or corporate marketing. And then suddenly, practically overnight, the internet collectively decides it is incredibly cringy and the entire trend is just canceled.
Right, the backlash is instant.
Right. So take that exact phenomenon, but scale it up to a massive, career-ending, socio-political level. Because that is essentially what happened to the entire genre of disco.
Yeah.
So how does an artist survive that kind of intense cultural whiplash?
Well, it requires an unbelievable amount of resilience and, a willingness to completely reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
Which, as our sources show today, is exactly what Donna Summer had to do. But to really understand those survival instincts, we have to look at where she started.
And it wasn't a nightclub?
No, not at all. Not under the flashing lights of a New York club. She was born on December 31st, 1948, in the Mission Hill neighborhood of Boston.
Okay.
Her father was a butcher, her mother was a school teacher, and she was raised in a very devout Christian household.
Right.
Her vocal origins are literally rooted in gospel. I mean, her very first performance was at age 10 when she just had to step in for a missing vocalist at her local church.
Okay, I just have a hard time wrapping my head around that.
It's quite the jump.
It is a wild leap. Going from a church choir in 1950s Boston to the global epicenter of erotic, pulsing dance music. Was she always aiming for that kind of dance club stardom?
Not even a little bit. Her early ambitions were much grittier.
Really?
Yeah, weeks before she was supposed to graduate high school, she actually left Boston. She joined a psychedelic blues rock band called Crow, and they headed to New York City. She was chasing a rock record deal.
Wait, blues rock? Like Janis Joplin style?
Exactly like that. She was a belter.
Oh, wow.
But when they got to New York, the labels only wanted to sign her. They didn't want the rest of the band.
Oh, of course.
Right. So the group dissolves. But instead of just giving up and going back home to Boston, she pivots.
Okay.
She auditions for the famous counterculture musical Hair. She lands the role of Sheila, but there is a major catch. To take the part, she has to move to Munich, Germany for the production.
Wow.
So in 1968, as a teenager, with her parents' reluctant approval, she relocates across the world to Europe.
The irony there is just staggering to me.
Isn't it?
I mean, the quintessential American disco icon. Right. The woman who defined the sound of American nightlife in the 70s literally had to move to Germany and sing folk rock and musical theater before finding her true sound.
Yeah. And she didn't just survive in Europe. I mean, she thrived. She became totally fluent in German. She performed in multiple major musicals like Godspell and Showboat.
So she was a working actor.
A working theater actor, exactly. She even did backing vocals under the pseudonym Gain Pierre. And during this time, she marries an Austrian actor named Helmut Summer. That's Summer spelled with an O.
Ah, which brings us to the typo.
Yes.
The sources mentioned this incredible accident in 1974. She crosses paths with these two Munich-based producers, Giorgio and Bellotte.
Right.
And they released her first album called Lady of the Night. And just to be clear for everyone listening, this album was not disco.
No, not at all.
It was this really eclectic mix of symphonic rock, folk, and pop. But when the record label printed the cover, they made a mistake. They misspelled her married name, Summer, as Summer with a U.
And she just embraced it. The name stuck. But the real artistic turning point?
The big moment.
Yeah, the moment that shifts her from a working European theater actor to a global superstar, that comes the following year, in 1975.
Okay.
Summer actually pitches an idea to Moroder for a song. She was heavily inspired by this scandalous, breathy French track by Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg. So Summer records a demo for Moroder using this heavily accentuated Marilyn Monroe-style voice.
Wait, so that breathy, sensual vocal style was her idea?
Yes.
I always assumed a male producer told her to sing like that to sell records.
No, it was entirely her creative pitch. She was basically playing a character, and that song became Love to Love You, Baby.
Wow.
The producers originally didn't even want her to sing the final version. They thought she should just write it for someone else. But her vocal on the demo was so compelling, they kept it.
And thank goodness they did.
Right. Then Neil Bogart, who was the notoriously extravagant president of Casablanca Records, hears it at an industry party in the U.S. And he is so obsessed with the groove that he demands a 16-minute version specifically engineered for discotheques.
16 minutes. That completely defies every rule of radio play.
Completely. But Bogart knew exactly what he had. The track simulated actual lovemaking, filled with very visceral moans and groans. It was incredibly provocative for 1975.
So provocative that it was literally banned.
Yes.
Like, the BBC refused to play it, and several American radio stations blacklisted it entirely. But, you know, the controversy just acted as marketing.
As it usually does.
Exactly. It became a massive global hit and her first U.S. top 5 single.
Well.
But reading through the sources, it seems like that massive success also became a trap for her. It boxed her into this persona of the First Lady of Love.
Exactly. She was terrified of being a novelty act, which she actively worked to evolve away from.
Right.
So by 1977, she and Moroder released a concept album called I Remember Yesterday. The album was designed to have different tracks representing different musical decades.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, and for the track representing the future, they created a song called I Feel Love. Giorgio Moroder himself later called this track really the start of electronic dance music.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener. Because if you pull up a top 40 playlist on your phone right now, you hear electronic beats everywhere.
Absolutely everywhere.
So why is I Feel Love so revolutionary? Like, what was happening in that Munich studio that hadn't happened before?
Well, to understand the breakthrough, you have to look at what disco sounded like before 1977.
Right.
Up to that point, disco tracks were heavily reliant on lush acoustic orchestration. We're talking real string sections, real horns, a full live band in a studio creating the groove.
Right.
I Feel Love stripped all of that away. The entire backing track was synthesized.
Using a Moog synthesizer.
Yes.
Right.
And back then, synthesizers were not the sleek laptops we have today.
No, of course not.
They were these massive, room-sized, temperamental machines. You had to physically patch cables to get a sound out of them. Mostly they were used by prog rock bands to make weird alien sci-fi sound effects.
Right, like novelty sounds.
Exactly. What Moroder and Bellotte figured out how to do was lock that Moog synthesizer into a pulsing, rhythmic, heartbeat-like groove.
Right.
They gave a machine a soul.
Wow.
And over that driving, mechanical dance line, Donna Summer laid down this incredibly ethereal, floating, gospel-tinged vocal. It proved that fully electronic music could have a physical, emotional groove.
That's amazing.
It really is. When you listen to modern EDM, house music, or even just heavily produced pop today, you are listening to the direct descendants of that specific recording session.
That is just incredible to think about. She basically co-authored the blueprint for the next 50 years of pop music. And it set off a run of superstardom that is almost hard to comprehend today. Let's talk about her peak between 1978 and 1979.
It was a massive peak.
I mean, she wins an Oscar and a Grammy for the song Last Dance. She releases her version of Jimmy Webb's MacArthur Park and becomes the first solo black female artist to simultaneously hold the #1 single and the #1 album in the U.S.
And the sheer volume of her output during this period is staggering. She became the first artist ever to have 3 consecutive #1 double albums.
Let's just pause on that because I really want you, the listener, to feel the weight of that achievement.
Yeah, it's huge.
A standard album is usually, what, 10 to 12 songs?
Right.
A double album is roughly 70 to 80 minutes of music.
Mm-hmm.
Doing 3 of those back to back, That means writing, producing, arranging, and recording over 60 songs in a 2-year window, all while maintaining top-tier #1 quality.
It's insane.
The physical and creative endurance that requires is just insane.
It really is a Herculean effort, and this peak is perfectly captured by her legendary Bad Girls album in 1979, which sold millions.
A classic.
What's brilliant about Bad Girls is that she brought her rock roots back into the fold, blending these gritty guitar and punk edges with R&B and dance.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes of all this record-breaking success, the sources reveal things were getting really tense with her label Casablanca.
Right, and this wasn't just a dispute over money either. This was a fight for creative respect.
Exactly.
Summer had written her very first entirely solo composition, a song called Dim All the Lights. And she desperately wanted a #1 pop hit strictly as a songwriter to prove she wasn't just a producer's muse.
Which is completely understandable.
Definitely. But Neil Bogart at Casablanca decided to put the label's promotional muscle behind a different track, No More Tears, which was her massive duet with Barbra Streisand.
And, you can see Bogart's logic. Pairing the two biggest female voices in the world at that moment was a guaranteed blockbuster.
Oh, for sure.
Both songs hit the top 5 simultaneously. But Dim All the Lights stalled out at #2, while the Streisand duet hit #1.
And reading her perspective on this in the sources, Summer was furious.
Yeah.
She felt she was deliberately undercut by her own label boss on a song she wrote entirely by herself. She wasn't getting the support she deserved for her solo writing, which ultimately led to a massive rift and her exit from Casablanca.
Which brings us to a massive thematic pivot in her career, because her fight for creative control coincided with an unprecedented cultural shift. By 1980, the United States was experiencing a severe, highly organized socio-political backlash against disco.
Right, the infamous death of disco.
Exactly.
Bringing back our internet trend analogy from earlier, the culture didn't just move on to a new sound. It actively weaponized its hatred against the old one. So how did this backlash actually manifest?
Well, the most famous example is Disco Demolition Night at Comiskey Park in Chicago in July 1979.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they literally blew up a crate of disco records on a baseball field, and it turned into a massive riot. But underneath the surface of rock fans just saying disco sucks, there were deep, undeniable racist and homophobic undertones.
Right.
Disco was a genre pioneered by Black, Latino, and gay communities in underground clubs. The backlash was really a mainstream rejection of that entire culture.
And the practical impact of that hostility was devastating. Radio stations literally began banning anything that sounded like urban dance music from the airwaves. Yeah. So here is Donna Summer, a Black female artist who defined the genre, staring down a radio climate that suddenly despises the very sound she popularized.
Exactly. So she does what she's always done. She reinvents herself.
Right.
She signs with David Geffen's brand new label and pivots hard away from disco. She releases an album called The Wanderer, diving into rock, new wave, and even inspirational music that reflected her new, born-again Christian faith.
But her time at Geffen wasn't exactly a smooth transition, was it?
Not at all. Geffen actually shelved her follow-up album because he didn't feel it was good enough for pop radio, and he pushed her to work with producer Quincy Jones instead.
Wow.
And in the midst of all this label drama, it turns out she still owed her old label, Casablanca, which was now owned by Polygram, one more record to fulfill her old contract.
And thank goodness she did, because the result of that contractual obligation was the 1983 smash hit, She Works Hard for the Money.
Oh, yeah.
That song became an absolute working-class anthem for women's rights. It also made Donna Summer one of the first Black female artists to get heavy video rotation on MTV, which was a huge barrier-breaking milestone at the time.
It was a massive triumph that proved her resilience. But as we move into the late 1980s, that resilience was tested by an entirely different kind of cultural landmine.
Yeah.
One that threatened to permanently sever her from the very community that made her a star. As objective reporters of the sources we have, it is crucial we explore exactly what happened regarding the controversy with her LGBTQ+ fanbase.
Right. So to set the context, in the 1970s, underground discotheques were one of the few safe havens for the gay community.
Mm-hmm.
Donna Summer's music was the soundtrack to that liberation. They were her earliest and most fiercely loyal demographic. But in the late 80s, a reporter for the Village Voice published claims that Summer had made deeply homophobic remarks at a 1983 concert in Atlantic City.
The specific allegations were that Summer, reflecting her new born-again faith, had called the emerging AIDS crisis God's divine punishment against gays, and that she allegedly used the phrase, "God made Adam and Eve," not Adam and Steve.
And when you try to imagine the sheer terror of the 1980s AIDS crisis, I mean, a disease that was decimating this specific community while the government largely ignored it, emotions were incredibly raw.
Absolutely.
It was literally a matter of life and death. So for her fan base to hear those alleged quotes, it felt like an existential betrayal.
And the fallout was incredibly severe. This culminated in 1989 when ACT-UP activists protested at a Boston gay pride event. When her music was played, the crowd began chanting, "Shame!" and eventually forced the DJ to take her records off.
So how did she navigate this? Because this wasn't just a standard PR crisis. It was a deeply personal accusation against her character.
Well, according to the sources, Summer vehemently and consistently denied ever making those statements about AIDS. In a major 1989 interview with The Advocate, which is a prominent gay publication, she said, "Anybody who really knows me knows I wouldn't say that." She explained that while she had embraced Christianity, she did not harbor hatred for the people who built her career.
Yeah.
She went on to send a direct letter to ACT-UP, apologizing for the immense hurt caused by the rumors and calling the entire situation a terrible misunderstanding.
She even took legal action to clear her name.
She did. In 1991, she sued New York Magazine when they printed the old rumors as absolute established fact. That lawsuit dragged on for years and was eventually settled out of court in 1995.
Wow.
But the shadow of that controversy lingered, and her commercial momentum definitely suffered as she lost a vital core of her audience during that era.
It's just a tragic situation fueled by fear and misunderstanding and a very dark historical moment.
And it perhaps partly explains why her pace shifted. As we get into the 90s and 2000s, Summer steps back a bit from the relentless music industry grind.
Yeah, she took a breather. Right. In 1995, she relocates to Nashville with her husband, Bruce Sudano, to focus on her family and a deep passion she had developed for painting.
But she certainly didn't vanish from the culture. She had a massive UK comeback in 1989, working with the hit-making producers Stock Aitken Waterman on the track. This time, I Know It's For Real.
A great track.
Yeah. She released a holiday album, starred in VH1 concert specials, and continued to reliably top the U.S. dance charts throughout the 90s and 2000s.
I love this detail from the sources, too. She even appeared on the iconic 90s sitcom Family Matters.
Yes.
She played Steve Urkel's Aunt Una in 2 different episodes. It just proved again how surprisingly versatile and self-aware she was. In 2008, she released Crayons, which would be her final album of fully original material.
Tragically, just 4 years later, on May 17, 2012, Donna Summer passed away from lung cancer at the age of 63.
And the details around her illness are really nuanced in the medical reporting.
They are.
Summer was a strict non-smoker, and she firmly believed she had contracted the cancer from inhaling toxic dust because she lived near Ground Zero in New York City during the September 11th attacks.
Right.
Although medical reports and biographers also pointed to potential compounding causes, like decades of exposure to heavy secondhand smoke in unventilated 70s nightclubs, as well as a history of cancer in her family genetics.
Whatever the cause, the outpouring of grief following her death was global and profound. Tributes poured in from figures across the cultural spectrum, from Barack Obama to Dolly Parton to Beyoncé.
Wow.
And Beyoncé explicitly noted that Summer was so much more than just a disco singer. She was a vocal pioneer. Her legacy was officially cemented with a posthumous induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2013, and just recently, the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2025.
And if you need undeniable proof that her music is truly timeless and crosses generational divides, we just have to look at the 2026 Winter Olympics.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Figure skater Elisa Liu won Team USA's first women's singles gold in 24 years. And what was the soundtrack to that historic gold medal performance?
Donna Summer's MacArthur Park Suite.
Exactly. And within 24 hours of that skate, streams of that 50-year-old song skyrocketed 1,292% on Spotify.
What's fascinating about that data is that it proves the music doesn't just survive on nostalgia.
No.
It continually finds new life and new emotional context. From a dimly lit disco floor in the 70s to the bright Olympic ice in 2026. The music survives because underneath the synthesized beat, there is a distinctly human heartbeat.
Which really brings us back to that tension we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive.
Right.
Donna Summer wasn't just a powerful voice slapped onto a manufactured beat by European producers. She was an incredibly resilient, brilliant artist who constantly fought for creative control. She demanded her solo writing be respected when label bosses tried to sideline her. She shifted genres entirely when the world turned its back on the music she made famous. She navigated intense cultural backlashes, and she cemented a legacy that effortlessly transcends generations.
She really did.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Think about what it takes to protect your creative soul when the whole world suddenly turns its back on the very sound you gave them.
That's a great point.
It's something to mull over. The next time you turn on the radio or a streaming playlist and you hear a pulsing, synthesized beat driving a pop song, you aren't just hearing a computer algorithm. You are listening to the echoes of Donna Summer's bravery in a Munich recording studio, insisting on finding the sound of the future.
A sound that we are still dancing to today.
Exactly. Thanks for listening to PPL Pod. Keep tuning in for more stories worth knowing.